Day 62, March 3rd. I'm going to have fun tomorrow with March 4th. But today, the concept of the day to ponder, to think about, is the spirit of cooperation. Do you have it? Do you recognize it when you see it in others? I was so excited this morning. Number one, I've caught up on sleep and feel well rested, which is always exciting when you wake up just boop, ready to go. And, I have even been wrestling a little bit, not having the spirit of cooperation, resisting some things, and fighting for my rights, and some different things recently. And that doesn't always feel good, but it does sometimes, because you feel justified and you're like, I am right. But sometimes if you are feeling that too strongly, it might actually be a good sign to get quiet for a minute, calm down, and really think, look at the bigger picture. Are you caught in the weeds? Are you, sometimes it really is worth fighting for our rights and not cooperating. But anyway, my reading this morning was, hey Steve, how are you? Is from 2 Kings. I wrapped up 1 Kings and started 2 Kings this morning. And none of it seemed, I was like, Lord, when I went into my prayer and meditation time about it, I was like, I don't see a common theme here. You're going to have to help me out on this one. And then about halfway through, it was just boop. I'm telling you, the word is living and dynamic. And it became so clear. So Elijah passes the mantle to Elisha at the end of 1 Kings. And he goes up to heaven. Elisha sees this through chariots of fire, horses of fire. He gets Elijah's cloak, and then he begins to perform miracles. And so 2 Kings, the beginning of 2 Kings, is sort of a documentation of some of these miracles. And I'm going to hone in on 2, although there were several that were mentioned. Well, maybe I'll mention several. You know me, I ramble. But he comes along a house of a widow who is she's just beside herself. She's been threatened by the authorities that if she doesn't pay her taxes or pay what she owes, her sons are going to be taken as payment and put to work as slaves. And she's like, Elisha, I and my husband, we serve the Lord. And I could use your help. I could use some cooperation here from God. And so he sees this in her. It's the spirit of cooperation, sorry, my hat, that is just in the background of this. And I love the idea, and we use that term a lot, but do we really stop and think about it? There is a spirit of cooperation that we can recognize in each other. We can feel it. Scientifically, we know now that our hearts have an electromagnetic field of 3 feet. Those of us that are more empathic or sensitive can sometimes pick up on these energies. And maybe you can too, but you just haven't known what that is. And I think we sense each other's, this spirit of cooperation. Okay, I'll help you, you help me, we can each get what we want. In my career, in one of my businesses, I am a real estate agent. And man, that is an important thing to get a deal to closing. When 2 agents have a spirit of cooperation, and that's what we're even called. in the lingo, in the biz, we are cooperating agents. And even though I'm representing my client, the other agent is representing that client, the common goal is to get this house to the closing table. It meets the seller's goal, it meets the buyer's goal. But there's a lot of that can happen and go sideways in that process. You're talking about somebody's home, they can take it personally when something is pointed out in the house that needs to get fixed. And, whenever there's money involved, like just so many things. So we can recognize agents even when that first email or offer is sent now, a lot of it's done digitally, or when we pick up the phone and we talk to each other, we can sense a spirit of cooperation like almost immediately. And it makes a big difference in knowing, how you're going to approach that transaction, how you're going to work with that agent, conversations you're going to have with your client, blah, 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 blah. It is so important. But there are a lot of people out there that do not have a spirit of cooperation. And that can make life challenging. And we're all human. At some point, we suffer from it ourselves. And I think that is what happens. We suffer from it. It causes suffering because ultimately it represents your spirit of cooperation with life itself, with God himself. How are you cooperating with life? Are you resisting? Are you trying to be right all the time? Are you trying to get your way all the time? And anyway, back to 2 Kings. So this woman is like, I need some help. And Elisha is like, oh, you're God's people. He wants to help you. You tell me what resources you have and we'll work with that. She's got some oil. She's got a flask, of olive oil. He says, go borrow as many jars as you can from your neighbors. And even right there, she must have a spirit of a cooperation because she's got neighbors giving her their empty jars. We're talking about, Old Testament times. People don't share, were probably a little stingy with sharing their resources because they didn't have many. So they're letting her have their empty jars. Spirit of cooperation. And anyway, she fills them all. It's enough to pay all of her debts and have leftover to live with. Olive oil was a precious commodity. Elisha's first miracle. And I love, and of course, as a woman, I hone in on there's 2 women right away that are part of his examples of this spirit of cooperation. The second story is the widow of Shunem, which is really interesting that her name is not given. Because as we'll see, he has a very close relationship with her, but she doesn't get named. And she is married, but her husband isn't named either. And it is and she is presented to us as a wealthy woman. I mean, again, Old Testament times, like what's happening here? My lid, you can't see my eyes. That's pretty unusual. So maybe this is her second husband and she doesn't have sons or children, or at least I think it specifically mentioned sons. But she recognizes when he goes through town one day, man of God, cooperating spirit, hey, let me feed you and take care of you. They must have hit it off really well, struck up a relationship, because now every time he comes through town, he stops at the wealthy woman's house. And we're told that her husband is old, but he's still out there working in the fields. So I don't know, that story just really caught me because women were secondary in those times. So, but it was the woman's wealth and house that was presented to us, even though she was married. And then she even instructs her husband, hey, this is a man of God. I love that. We want to make sure he keeps coming to visit us, and let's build him his own room. So they build him a room on the roof of the house with a bed and a lamp. They make it really cozy, like it's just for him, and they call it the upper room. So that's really interesting. So he never forgets this spirit of cooperation. It exists between them now. And he's so grateful. He's like, tell me what you want. I'll help you. I want to help you. I want to give back to you. And she says, really, no, I'm so well taken care of. I don't need anything. But his servant says, she doesn't have any sons. So maybe, because she says, no, my family takes care of me well. And so he said, okay. He takes his servant's advice and says, oh, I'm going to give you a son. This time next year when I come visit you, you are going to have a son in your arms. And she was like, oh, don't tease me like that. Don't get my hopes up. But it comes to pass. And the boy grows up. All is good. He is struck by a huge headache that sends him running home, complaining about his head when he's young. And she's still able to pick him up. So I'm going to guess he's probably 5 or 6 if he was old enough to be out in the fields, but still young enough to be held. So she's like, oh my gosh, we've got to get Elisha here. He's got to help us. And she goes herself. They try to get her to stay home, I'll go. She's like, nope, I am going. Me and Elisha are going to talk. She pleads with him to come. Even Elijah tries to send his servant ahead, going, hey, or send his servant only and say, hey, just take my staff and touch the child's face with it. And she insists, she's like, no, you have to come personally. I won't leave unless you come with me. So they go together, and then there's this beautiful story of him actually laying over the child and warming his body up, eyes looking into his eyes, the whole, it's really kind of a cool scene. A spirit of cooperation, literally hovering over the body, saying, come back to life, and cooperating with God, and it gave me chills this morning, how important that is, and must have been the message that I needed, because I've been, there we go, sunrise. I've been fighting with a few things internally, is this right? It's my Enneagram one wing coming up out, I tend to fight. And that's sort of resisting life, resisting God in certain circumstances. I don't know that that's true across the board. That is where we have to use the spirit of discernment and know when we're off track, and we need to get back in alignment in a spirit of cooperation first with God, use whatever language you want, that's mine, and then back out with other people, circumstances, events, because even though our goals are not the same, oftentimes they can overlap, and we need each other to accomplish. We need to help other people. They need to help. We need to receive help. There's a lot of us out there that, especially here in America, I think it's just how we were suck it up, buttercup, pull up your bootstraps, that spirit of individualism, I'm going to do it on my own. And we can really make things harder on ourselves when we go it alone. But there's a certain something in the Western DNA that says that's what we need to do. And that's, God's way is an upside down way. So I'm going to let his word speak for itself as it spoke to me. If you want to read the end or the beginning of 2 Kings yourself and see what he says to you, I'm learning that he is going to use his word, and you spending time with him and meditating on his word to give you the word that you need. And I'd love to hear, if something different comes out to you reading Elisha's miracles. And anyway, all right. Bye. Have a great Thursday, March 3rd, 2022, or whenever you are watching this. Who knows? Once you start putting recordings out in the world, you know, don't know where they'll go after that. So wherever you are, go out and have a spirit of cooperation. Let that land on you. Notice it in other people, and let that be a guide, and see what doors that might open for you. If you've been banging against one that seems like it's locked, or maybe lead you in another direction to try another one. All right, bye.